Welcome to another edition of Ask Isaiah. It's your host Isaiah Rhodes, and today is the day that the NBA playoffs start. The energy is just palpable when I think about, all of the matchups. There's a case for all teams to have a chance at winning. And on today's first day, we have four games. You have San Antonio and Golden State to start the primetime matchup this Saturday, 3 p.m. Then the next game will be Washington and Toronto. Now, Toronto is the number one overall seed in the Eastern Conference for the first time in franchise history, and they're looking to, right some wrongs in the playoffs. So this particular matchup for both teams will be huge. Then you have for the nighttime games, you have 76ers versus Miami, and the last game is Portland versus New Orleans. Now, in that first matchup with San Antonio and Golden State, obviously you have key players missing on both sides. San Antonio is missing Kawhi Leonard, who's only played 9 games this year and has dealt with a myriad of injuries, comeback injury and comebacks. So there's a lot going on in regards to that situation with Kawhi. As he played his last game in San Antonio? Has, the writing been on the wall for him to move on to greener pastures? All these things are in effect because of last year where Zaza Pachulia undercut Kawhi Leonard on a three-point shot when San Antonio was up 23 points in game one in Golden State. And many thought that San Antonio had a shot to really put a scare in Golden State on their way to their second championship in 3 years. But with that being said, Golden State is dealing with a lot of injuries as well. They're on their way to a potential four final in 4 years. So obviously they're battle tested, but they're running on fumes in certain respects. You have Steph Curry, who's dealt with an ankle injury and a sprained MCL. He's reportedly out for the entire first round, and he's aiming to come back in the second round. But it's been proven that when Steph Curry's not there, Golden State is a totally different team. Now, in 33 games without Curry in the last 2 seasons, the Warriors are 19 and 14. With that being said, a lot of things are affected when Curry's on the floor. He impacts how the defenses have to spread the floor because of his prowess to pull from anywhere on the floor. Even without the basketball, he's such a threat. Now that he's gone, you take away the key option offensively, but then it forces Klay Thompson to make more plays off the dribble, which is not his strong suit. And Kevin Durant, while he's an efficient scorer, isn't necessarily the best playmaker on a consistent basis. And then you got to take into account also that Draymond Green has struggled shooting the basketball this year, and when he's not able to make shots, it takes away from his ability to keep the defense honest. Also, the depth of the Warriors is much different than years past. Obviously, when you get a Kevin Durant, you have to get rid of a lot of key pieces, and it worked in their favor last year. But this year, you have an older Iguodala, older Sean Livingston, who's missed games. You have an older David West, and I think all of that lended itself into why the Warriors finished the season 7-10 in their last 17 games. So this particular series, while the Warriors, because of their star power, are the prohibited favorites, even without Steph. I think San Antonio, with the likes of Greg Popovich, a championship caliber coach, 5-time champion, Hall of Famer, of course, his preparation and the way he has his teams prepared will always have them in a position to compete at a high level, even when they have a young team like they do with DeJounte Murray, Kyle Anderson, Forbes, and other players. You have Rudy Gay, who's been coming on strong in the last 20 games of the season, averaging 11 and a half points off the bench, and he's shooting 46% in the second half of the season. He had to come back from an Achilles injury, so playing on the Spurs, giving him another option to support LaMarcus Aldridge, who's put on the All-NBA performance this year, really carrying the Spurs despite the injury to Kawhi Leonard. To have them in position to compete in the playoffs is a testament to how good he's played at this point in his career. So I think that Spurs and Golden State series, while, like as I mentioned, Golden State is the favorite, but we should have an interesting series. Now, the second game, as I mentioned, Toronto and Washington, both teams have something to prove. Now, Toronto overachieved this season. This is the fourth time in 5 years that they've had a franchise high in wins. They have 59 wins this season, and a lot of that had to do with changing their offense. They increased their three-point shooting while improving their bench. They have one of the best benches in the league, led by Fred VanVleet. He has a shoulder bruise, so that should affect their bench depth to a certain degree. But I think with the likes of what DeMar DeRozan has done this year, averaging 23 points, but really improving his three-point shooting, it affected how Toronto moved and spaced the ball. They play with a lot more flow. Also, defensively, they only allowed they allowed their opponents 29% of their shots to come from the three-point line, and that's tops in the league. So when you deny the three-point shot, that puts the teams in position to have to take long mid-range twos, and for what Toronto has been able to do defensively is put them in position to win a lot of close games. Now for Washington, as I mentioned, they underachieved. A lot of that had to do with John Wall's injury problems this season, but also I just think that what Washington accomplished last year in terms of pushing Boston to a seventh game, it really inflated their confidence, and they disrespected a lot of the different opponents throughout the year. As you can see, when you look at their record against below 500 teams, it's not good considering the all-star caliber players that they have, John Wall and Bradley Beal. And then you look at Kelly Oubre or Otto Porter. These guys should have performed much better than they did. But I think as they came into the season, they had a sense of entitlement, especially when you consider the changes that happened with Cleveland and Boston. They probably felt like they were a shoo-in to make that run. But with the inconsistencies from the offense throughout the year, struggles with John Wall, and a lot of internal problems in terms of team chemistry, it affected how Washington played, and they limped into the latter parts of this season. The last 21 games, they really struggled. John Wall missed 17 of those games, and then when he came back, trying to get back in the flow, it didn't work. So they have to figure out how to get more cohesive offensively. But I feel like because Toronto hasn't proven themselves in the playoffs on a consistent basis, Washington should feel like even though they're the eighth seed, that they can pull the upset. Now, 3 years ago, Washington played Toronto in the 4-5 series, and Washington upset Toronto. So for Toronto, they have a lot that they have to prove as well. They did play, as I mentioned, 59 games. They did win 59 games this season, but they still have a lot to prove in the playoffs. Now, the next matchup is Miami and Philadelphia. This matchup is very intriguing. Now, Philadelphia is the hottest team in the NBA right now. The league going into the playoffs with a 16-game winning streak. That's the largest winning streak of any team going into the playoffs. The 16-game winning streak for the Philadelphia 76ers is a franchise record, and they're led by redshirt rookie Ben Simmons, who in my opinion is rookie of the year, averaging 16 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, and just having the ability to impact the game in a variety of ways without scoring and catapulting this team to 52 wins is something that many who have followed this team for years had to deal with trusting the process, and that has been led by the polarizing player who just energizes this entire franchise, Joel Embiid. He's going to miss the first game of the season, the first game of the postseason due to an orbital fracture, but he has been fitted for a mask, and because there's 2 to 3 days of rest in between games in the first round, the pain threshold should subside, and they're saying that Joel Embiid should be ready for game 2. It's not locked in, set in stone yet, but Joel Embiid shouldn't miss that many games for the first round. With that said, the 76ers are one of the best offensive teams in the league right now. Going into the second half of the season, they're the only team to rank in the top 5 in defensive efficiency and offensive efficiency. So that shows you that the pace of play in which they're playing at, and it's really challenging the opposition. And because of Ben Simmons' ability to see over everything and really orchestrate and set up great shooters like J.J. Redick, Marco Bellinelli, and beyond, Dario Saric, Ilyasova, these players have an opportunity to really make a run. Considering Miami, it doesn't have the star power. They have great depth. They run 10 deep. They have 8 players who average in double figures. 5 of those players have scored. 5 of those players have hit at least 100 threes. So and Wayne Ellington has hit the most threes off the bench in a single season in NBA history. So Miami, while they don't have the star power of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, they do have depth, as I mentioned, and they're coached by a coach in Eric Spoelstra, who's won 2 championships, been to 4 finals, so he understands the the level that you have to play at. And I feel like with Dwayne Wade coming back in the second half of the season has really provided great leadership and put Miami in position to probably make some upsets. We have to watch that Hassan Whiteside and Joel Embiid matchup throughout this series once Joel Embiid comes back. And also, we have to see how Markelle Fultz, in returning, has come off the bench. We have to see how he plays as well in his first real concentrated action of playoffs. So that particular matchup is going to be intriguing to see. And then the final matchup of the night will be New Orleans and Portland. Damian Lillard has had an outstanding season, arguably a first-team All-NBA member. And when you look at how C.J. McCollum has played, putting Portland in position to be a 3rd seed in the West is something that nobody expected. Many people expected OKC and Minnesota to be the second half of the top 4. But because of how Damian Lillard has played, because of how C.J. McCollum has played, Nurkic has also played well in spots. He's inconsistent in some areas, but in the latter part of the season, he's been very consistent. And then Al-Farouq Aminu has really improved his three-point shooting. Shabazz Napier has played well off the bench as well. Evan Turner has found a way to really impact this team. In the beginning last year when he first signed that contract, it was some inconsistencies, but I think he's very comfortable with Portland now, and he's found his niche. So Portland has been able to really, really, really put teams on notice in terms of how they play. For New Orleans, they had to deal with the devastating injury of DeMarcus Cousins, a player putting up career numbers this season. But I think Alvin Gentry has found a way to salvage this season. Obviously, when you have a franchise-defining player like Anthony Davis, anything is possible. But I think in terms of how all the other players have rounded out, Rajon Rondo has come into his own with this particular team. He's a battle-tested playoff performer. Drew Holiday is a very underrated player, both offensively and defensively. And then you have, players that aren't necessarily the best, but they found ways to make things happen. Ian Clark is an NBA champion. He's played with the Golden State Warriors for a number of years, and he's won, so he understands playoff pressure. And then you have Milicic, who wow, he did, come from Chicago. He had to deal with some issues over there. He's come over and provided some great depth in terms of shooting and size on the rebounding tip with Anthony Davis. So I think New Orleans and how they're gonna figure out how they're gonna compete with this team. I think when you have a dynamic player like Anthony Davis and you have playoff performers like Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo, anything is possible. All of these games will settle off the NBA playoffs. Now you have other games coming tomorrow. You have Oklahoma City and Utah. You have Houston and Minnesota. You have Boston. You have Boston and Milwaukee, and then you have Cleveland and Indiana. Those games Sunday will be previewed by me coming up in the morning. So just enjoy this first day of 2018 NBA playoffs, and we'll be back with much more. As God said.